The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Yes, hello everyone. This is All You Can Eat, the podcast about deliciousness, episode number 38. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you live from New York City, New York. Lovely day here in town, about 40 degrees. But happy to be alive. Glad to be with you this evening on the podcast. And we have a special guest tonight, Author Bovino. We're going to be talking so much about food that I have warned you in advance. If you're hungry, you may not want to hear this. Or, better than that, get yourself something to eat right now. Because Author knows food. I'll introduce him to you shortly. He writes about food, and he writes about travel, and he's written a book. And are we on now, Jimmy? Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen.
No, you're live. You've been live.
I've been live. Well, there you go. You know, what is all you can eat without one technical issue, and here we are. Anyway, we're live. We're going to be on with Author. I'll introduce you to soon. And as I was saying, it's a lovely day here. We got a lot to talk about. Get some food in front of you. I will tell you that right now, to my right, is a perfect martini, and I know Arthur's going to be jealous because I'm telling you, man, I have mixed myself a perfect martini, and this is what I'm saying. Here's the point of this story here. Getting off to a rough start. Sorry about coming in late. Apparently we're going to be running late as well, but that's okay. Next to me is a perfect martini, and I'm happy about that, and I'm going to discuss that with Arthur too, because I'm going to be honest with you, there's a lot of things to like about it, including that I actually keep a martini glass in the freezer for a moment like this. And so there it is. It's staring at me right now. I have in front of me what I would call a whole bunch of input. For example, today's or New York Times food section from the last couple of days. Here's an article in the Hungry City section. It's the top cheap bites of 2018. I want to talk about that. Normally, I would do that kind of in advance of having Author on, but I think we're going to do that one together. And I also have in front of me the New York Times most popular recipes of 2018. So we're going to get into that. This is why I'm saying if you are hungry, be careful, because next thing you know, you're going to be starving. Now, I also have in front of me, and I'm very excited to discuss this with Arthur as well, the 10 great New York dishes of 2018, written by none other than Mr. Pete Wells, who writes the restaurant reviews for the New York Times. This one was published yesterday on the 11th of December, today being 12/12. But I want to talk about the 10 great dishes of New York. And I'm going to also save that for my conversation with Arthur. Let's see, what else do I have in front of me here? 50 most popular recipes, if we want to, right? We talked about that. Oh, and just a little housekeeping here, which is to say that in January, and specifically here I'm talking about January the 23rd, if you happen to be one of those people who was in or around New York City, I myself will be teaching a what you would call a cooking class on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's called 5 Courses, 15 Ingredients, and all I am going to say to you is if you want to come cook with me a 5-course meal, 15 ingredients, and you are going to. It's class participation. You know what I mean? You're going to have a cutting board, and we're going to prepare dishes together, and we're going to serve wine with the meal. If this is of interest to you, all you have to do is find me so that I can send you the link to register, although I know that there's only a few spots left in the class. But anyway, that really just applies to the people that are in and around the New York area. If you want to come cook with me on the 23rd of January, 7 p.m., send me an email or an email. How you can email me? shortorderdad@gmail.com. That's the easiest way. shortorderdad@gmail.com. I'll be teaching a class there, 15 ingredients to make 5 courses, and that is on the 23rd of January, coming up here in New York City, New York, my friends. Now, let me introduce to you my friend Arthur Bovino, because I wanted to spend tonight's show talking about food, and Arthur knows food. Now, I'm going to tell you about Arthur. First of all, he is a food and travel writer. And he wrote a book very recently called Buffalo Everything. And Arthur ate his research, and he takes you, the reader, to the bars and the old school kind of Polish and Italian-American eateries of Buffalo, and the Burmese restaurant, and the new school restaurants that are tapping into the region's rich agricultural bounty. Can you tell I'm reading that? I can. Yeah, thank you. And with all the experience under his belt, I'm assuming having expanded, we'll talk to him about that, Bovino has created the essential guide to food in Buffalo. But here's the thing about Arthur. He also knows New York. Arthur, are you there?
I'm here, Rob. I'm jealous that I don't have a martini next to me, and I feel like I planned poorly here.
I probably should have given you a little bit more of a heads up, but I like to think of the podcast as like having dinner with friends. And, and I probably should have made a bigger deal about this just in general. I really feel like people, Wednesday night at 8 o'clock is such a great time to have a podcast if you think about it, because Wednesday is like the food day, at least here in New York, between the New York Times and the Post and blah, blah, blah. It's like the day that people really are talking about food. And so Wednesday at 8 p.m., live, and I'd like to say hello to my friends up there in Boston, and wherever you are, by the way, in the world listening live, hello. I want to say that this is a good time to talk about food, and I use it as an opportunity to kind of like, almost as if you and I, if we were together in person, would be, in a kitchen. There'd be something on the stove, and we'd be having a drink. So my apologies to you for not giving you the proper kind of head start on how we handle this, because I'm about to take a sip of a perfect martini.
Well, I mean, I should have known better. I do have a large beer next to me, but for those who don't know, when I was at the Daily Meal, Rob actually was doing videos there and would come in and actually made me a martini one day at my desk in the afternoon, and I will never forget that I was made a perfect martini at my desk at work one afternoon. So I should have known better, and I should have prepared and made myself a martini in your honor tonight, Rob. Thanks for having me, though.
I am glad that you're here with me, because I feel like all I really wanted to do tonight, every podcast, I suppose, by definition, is a little bit different, even though the theme of All You Can Eat is always about deliciousness. Everyone is a little bit different. And I've had interesting people on, people who are, authors, as yourself, people who are journalists, like yourself, people who are cooks, restaurateurs, etc., etc., and everyone is a little bit different. But what I was glad about when I got together with you was the idea that we could spend the bulk of this show talking about food.
Yeah.
And I want to start at the very beginning. Where did you grow up, Arthur?
I grew up on Long Island. We moved to Hong Kong for about 5 years in my teens, and then moved back to New York to the same house. I went to school in D.C., but since then I've been living in New York City. So for the past 20 years, basically, I've been in New York City.
What was I didn't know did you say Hong Kong?
Yeah.
What's that? What was that all about?
My dad worked for Citicorp, and we went there for his job, and it was a great experience. I mean, growing up in Hong Kong in the late 80s, being exposed to a completely different culture and doing a lot of traveling with my folks around Asia. We went to China and Singapore and Japan and Thailand and a lot of Bali and a bunch of other countries in Asia during that time. So I was lucky and fortunate enough to have that experience and have a lot of great food growing up and be exposed to a lot of different cultures.
I was going to ask you about the food growing up, but even before I do, what I'm really curious about, Arthur, is if you had the opportunity, you have a child now, do you not?
Yeah.
Okay. If you had the opportunity to move the family to a foreign country for a period of time,
yeah,
is it something that you would be excited to do?
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. My sister actually is now living in Hong Kong. She's a professor. She moved back there, so I'm a little bit jealous. Last year, everybody went to visit. My whole family went to visit her, and I wasn't able to go. And they visited all the places that we went to as kids, and I kind of felt like I was dead or something. I was a ghost watching them go to all these places that we used to go to, and they're putting it on Instagram, and I'm like, this really sucks. You guys are killing me. But I would totally do it in a heartbeat. I'd move to Japan. I'd move to Hong Kong. I mean, I'd live anywhere actually. Within not anywhere, but I'd love to do that. Yeah, that'd be great.
That's that's cool. I was this past weekend, or maybe the weekend before, I go to a wedding, my cousin's wedding, and the long story short, I don't even. The long story short is that one of my cousin, who's a contemporary of mine, had suggested to his niece, the next generation down, that she spend some time living in Japan. And she thinks it's a great idea, so she goes and she ends up meeting a Japanese guy there and marrying him, and just had a baby, and they live in Japan. And now, of course, my cousin's sister, the mother of this girl that my cousin that I'm referring to, is really pissed for having sent her over there, because now, her granddaughter is living, thousands of miles away on another continent.
Yeah, it's a long trip. It's not an easy trip.
No, it's not an easy trip. What, Arthur, what did you eat, growing up? What was the food situation growing up for you?
Long Island, I got introduced to grandma pizza and, Italian American and, Jewish, foods, but, living in Hong Kong, got exposed to Indian food, vegetarian food, obviously Cantonese street food and dim sum palaces. And, I remember I went to the French International School in Hong Kong, and I'll never forget on Wednesday mornings that if you got there early enough, there were hot pain au chocolat that you could buy for $5 Hong Kong on the playground. So you always made sure to get there early enough on Wednesday mornings, because those chocolate croissants were,
wow.
Probably they formed my memory, my idea of what one should be. The chocolate was still hot inside, and there was copious amounts. You get like a pain au chocolat in a lot of places, and there's not enough chocolate inside.
Right.
Well, there was never a problem with this.
Not only was it inside, it was warm still.
Yes.
That's fantastic. I love that story. What about growing up, on Long Island, as you said? What was the food situation there? What were you eating growing up? My mom cooked a lot, even though she worked full time. There was always a homemade meal, almost always at the end of the day. Right.
But, I remember having Sunday suppers where we would have raviolis, and my grandfather would bring a nice loaf of sesame studded bread from the local Italian bakery that he would always swear by. And we would go to Umberto's and get grandma pizza. There was, growing up, there was Bagel Boss, and we had, fresh bagels, and that kind of formed my belief in what a good bagel is. I don't believe you should ever toast a bagel, because if you need to toast a bagel, it's not fresh, and therefore you shouldn't be eating it. So that when you live like 3 blocks from a bagel place, you can almost always get a fresh bagel. I mean, I also lived in a Jewish neighborhood, so there was they're definitely being introduced to matzo balls and pastrami and, all kinds of great stuff like that.
I'm excited to talk to you for a variety of reasons, and I think it's part of the reason is because not only did we kind of come up in the same general, environment, but I think we think alike. I reprimand people who have the nerve to toast a fresh bagel. I literally am like, if you're toasting that bagel, you're a loser. Like you just don't understand it. Like if you're getting a bagel, and frankly, look, we're in New York, okay? So we're blessed in the sense that we actually have real great, fresh, bagels. I could understand how in certain parts of the country you have no choice. You don't even understand what it's like. We get these things that are coming hot out of the oven. I mean, to toast that is a nightmare.
It makes me mad and it makes me mean.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point I'm making. Now, on another subject, because you brought it up, tell the people who don't know. And then, by the way, there are two parts to this. I want you to tell the people who don't know what it is, what a grandma pizza is, because I'm going to tell you that again. We're kind of like stupid lucky in New York in the sense that we have some of the finest pizza in the world. And again, I'm not even pulling the New York bias here. I know that you've had experience with Lou Malnati's. I know that you like Buffalo pizza. You and I have had pizza in New Haven and in Italy and all over the place. But let's face it, we have a lot of good pizza. So I want two things here. I want you to tell people what grandma pizza is, and I also want you to explain where your kind of designation, you are the pizza cowboy. Where did that come from? But let's start off with the grandma pizza.
A grandma pizza was actually originated out on Long Island. It's a square or rectangular pie, and it's been cooked in a pan that's usually coated in olive oil, and you get a thin layer of mozz, and then you get uncooked canned or fresh tomatoes. And the origin of the pizza itself supposedly is that this was a pizza that the guys would make for themselves. It wasn't on the menu. And, one guy would say to the other, hey, let's make that pie that grandma used to make, And so they would make it for themselves and they would eat it. And then eventually somebody saw it, or people caught on, or people knew that they were making it or saw it, and they started making it and selling it, and it was a big hit. Grandma pizza gets thrown around a lot, that term these days, and I feel like there are much thicker pies that are being called grandma pies. The grandma pies that I remember from Long Island, from my youth, and when I go back to the same places now, are thinner. It's not a thick slice. This is not a Sicilian slice. It can be rectangular, it can be square. That doesn't necessarily make it a grandma pie to me. It's got to be somewhat thin. It's not cracker thin, but it's thinner. It's not a New York slice thin, but it's not a Sicilian. It's like somewhere in between, but more towards the thin crust. But I could parse these details forever. The pizza cowboy thing came about because I launched the 101 best pizzas in America list for the Daily Meal about 7 years ago, and it's basically become an obsession. It's become one of the pieces that I'm most well known for. And when I was looking to come up with a moniker, my wife is Texan, and I kind of just decided that I wear cowboy boots, and I've been wearing cowboy boots for about 20 years now, before I even met my wife. And I just decided that was, I'm somewhat outspoken and opinionated, and can get myself in trouble sometimes with things that I say, so a little bit of a cowboy. So that's Pizza Cowboy. Makes
total sense to me. And since we're on the subject, by the way, what's your kind of like bagel situation, in the sense that what do you put on a bagel?
If we're going back to bagels, though, I do want to mention that Essa Bagel, which is my local spot, that's my place in the East Village, just north of the East Village. They moved across the street a couple of years ago. And when they did, before they moved, they did not toast. So you would go in there and the tourists would say toast, and they would get very upset, and they would say, no toast, we don't toast. There's no toaster that we don't toast. And I was always very proud of them for doing that. When they moved across the street, they do have a toaster, which makes me a little upset that they didn't translate that gruffness and adherence to this rule across the street. But I guess, if they're going to do it, and they were the ones that were kind of establishing that, one of the stalwarts of that rule, a part of me has to let go a little bit, but it did disturb me greatly when that happened. In terms of what I have on my bagel, it's cream cheese and Nova. That's it. I get an everything bagel, cream cheese and Nova. It's interesting that you asked this, and it makes me think about the amount of cream cheese ratio to bagel. Growing up, I remember there being almost as much cream cheese as there was bagel. I'm not even kidding. Now, people will do the schmear, and when I hear schmear, I feel like people that say schmear aren't New Yorkers most of the time. Like, nobody says a schmear, but maybe I'm wrong. That's just me.
Right.
But when they spread the cream cheese on my bagel so thinly that there's barely enough, like I want the calories. Like, I want there to be almost as much cream cheese on my bagel as there is bagel. Right. That's my thing. But
I understand.
That's how I have my bagel.
That's a personal preference situation, but what you highlight here, and what I would like to underscore, is the importance always of proportion. Yeah. Like, whether or not we're talking about a bagel or pizza or a sandwich, we cannot understate or undervalue the importance that proportion makes in a thing. It's just
100%, Rob. And this is, to me, is like also, that's why I also do like flaxseed nearby, because the bagels are smaller. Over the years, we both know this, bagels have become monstrosities. Some of these bagels, the bagels have increased in size because people started making sandwiches out of the bagels, and so you needed more bread. And like that, to me, like, you don't need as much. You don't need it to be a huge like rock of a piece of bread. It should be in proportion to exactly like you said.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know Michael Ruhlman, but he's a pretty well-known food guy and author. And one of the books that he wrote, and I have it in my house, and I'm not going to pretend that I read the whole thing, but one of the books that he wrote is Ratio. Yeah. And the thing about Ratio is, and this is one of those like little things that people don't talk about a whole lot, but it's crucial. Like, you don't have to be a brilliant cook to make great food at home, but you do need to understand a couple of principles. And one of the principles happens to be ratio. And I mean that whether or not, like I said, whether you're talking about, sandwich or pizza or bagel, or even, for example, martini. Like, there is so many, or here's one for you, vinaigrette. Like, the point is that one of the things that the unskilled, the uninitiated, the kind of educated, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Most people, didn't get to go to cooking school like you and I. But one of the things that kind of the masses don't understand is the critical importance of the ratio, and how that little bit can make a difference.
Yeah, totally.
I segue over to, because I suspect that you are of Italian heritage and you grew up in this part of the world, will there be in your very near future a feast of the seven fishes?
We do one every year. This year we're actually going to we're going to miss it because we're going down to Texas for the Christmas holiday because Gus, our son, has not been there yet. But we do it every year. Usually we do far more than seven fishes. Sometimes it gets to be ridiculous, but I think past 2 years, we topped 20. I think there were 21 quote unquote fishes one year, and then 23. But, our fishes go beyond fish. It becomes, we've got oysters, we've got clams, we've got shrimp, king crab. But yeah, we do it. We do that every year. It's probably that and Thanksgiving are my two favorite. I might even like the Feast of the Seven Fishes more than Thanksgiving.
By the way, that actually reminds you that not more than it was actually right before Thanksgiving. So today is the 12th. Thanksgiving is more like in the 20s, somewhere there. So like 3 weeks ago, guess where I was? I was at... I went over to the rooftop over at Jules' mom place and picked up my 50 oysters.
Oh, yes.
I picked up...
we missed it this year. It's funny because I bumped into you there like at least twice, I feel like.
Yeah.
We just couldn't make it happen this year with Gus and trying to get out to Long Island and everything else with family, but...
No, not a big. It just reminded me that I knew that you would appreciate that I popped in over there for my annual allotment of oysters, and that's always very exciting. What? Just out of curiosity, by the way, when you do the 7 fish, feast, or in your case 20 fishes, what are people drinking?
Well, recently they've been drinking Tom and Jerry cocktails.
Oh, right. You mentioned. I see that all over the place. What's a Tom and Jerry cocktail?
So a Tom and Jerry cocktail is like the best eggnog that you've ever had, but it's not actually eggnog. Eggnog is actually has like a milk or cream added to it, and there's no such thing with a Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry cocktail used to be a much more prevalent drink. If you remember watching The Apartment with
Jack Lemmon?
You know what I'm talking about. Great old school black and white movie. There's a line in the movie where he says, Mr. Sheldrake, or Mr. Sheldon, or whatever it is, the Tom and Jerry cocktail is in the fridge, and he's giving a list of things that he's taking care of. So it was a well-known thing that people across the country knew about. Now it's really mostly known in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Buffalo. And I encountered it in Buffalo, where there is a great Tom and Jerry tradition. You can get the cocktail from basically right around Thanksgiving until at least New Year's. And then some places serve it a little bit later. And basically what they do is a very long-winded explanation, but they separate the egg whites and the yolks, and they whip the whites into peaks. Then they mix the two together, and there's sugar, confectioner's sugar, some bitters, some nutmeg, and some cinnamon. And then they take a mug, they pour some hot water into it, dump it out, pour the mixture in, and then you get some rum, some cognac, and then they hit it with hot water, and then it all kind of mixes together and floats up to the top, and you get this very airy, creamy, indulgent, sweet, frothy, just winter in a cup. I mean, it's like, in the book when I write about it and I'm trying to tell people where to go for the best versions of it, I wasn't able to rank it because it was kind of like ranking Christmases, and something about it just didn't seem like right to do. But it's just a great old school cocktail, and it deserves to be much more well known.
Okay, let us use that as a jumping off point, because I realize now in looking at where we're at that we probably won't even get to some of the things that I had mentioned earlier about 10 great New York, dishes and the cheap and all that kind of stuff, because I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk to you about Buffalo. Okay. So just so that everybody knows, you write a book. It's called Buffalo Everything, A Guide to Eating in the Nichols City. That's published recently. When was it published, Arthur?
It was published in August, and actually the project turned into 2 books, and the second book came out just about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, sweet. Which is what?
The Buffalo, New York Cookbook.
Perfect. Okay, so the first obvious question is, what? WTF, as the kids like to say. Why Buffalo?
So I had the idea of doing a buffalo sauce cookbook, and I had always wanted to go to Buffalo to do a wing tour, and because everything in my life revolves around pizza, I had been hearing about the Buffalo pizza scene for years and I needed an excuse to get up there. So basically, I went up there with the idea that I was going to write a buffalo sauce cookbook, and I started doing all this research while I was there. Ate at about 100, 120 restaurants in a month. I moved up there for a month and just learned that there was so much more to Buffalo than wings. So that's basically what happened.
And it turned out to be not only more than wings. It turned out to be two books. I mean, that's a lot of work. Well, I guess let's just start off. I guess we start with the wings. I noticed in your kind of like compilation of the best wings, you didn't even mention the high altar of chicken wings up in Buffalo where they started over at the Anchor, right? Isn't that where it started?
Yeah, I mean, when I ranked the list of places to go, I put Anchor at 20th out of 20. So, I mean, you have to go to say you've been.
Right.
But you don't go there for wings. And I'm not trying to put them down or say that they're bad, or it's a tourist trap. You know, I mean, we have them here, and there are certain places that we don't go to that people talk about or feel like they need to make pilgrimages to.
Right.
If you're going to Buffalo, you need to go to Anchor just to check it off your list.
Right.
You need to go to Duff's because that's the place that people talk about as being the place that locals go. Really, Duff's is the new Anchor. It's just better. But you have to go to both, really, check them both off your list, and then you can get down to the real nitty-gritty of where to go for great wings.
Now, I see also, I'm looking at something that you've done here. You have kind of like your classic wings, 9/11, Bar Bill, Kelly's Corner, Gabriel's Gate, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Then you have tricked out wings, double dipped BBQ Cajun, Abigail's with blue cheese. The sauce incorporates that. And then you have your garlic Parmesan wings. Tell the people here, again, our job, Arthur, is to get people starving. Talk about some of the alternative wings that you had up in Buffalo.
So a couple of, I'll get to that, but I want to mention one thing. Like one of the truisms that I learned about wings in Buffalo is that if your wings are taking less than 16 minutes to get to you, they've been sitting out. They've been par cooked and then they're being redropped for you. Really good wings take about 16 minutes at about 375, and that's it. They take that amount of time, and there are places that will tell you in advance, like, expect your wings to take this amount of time, and people just know it. They don't complain about it. It's not a big deal. Like, they just know they're going to be waiting for wings. And if you go to a place that has a wait, you'd be waiting at least 40 minutes or an hour and a half for your wings, and that's the deal. And you're going to get super crispy wings. Buffalonians also will order their wings with the specificity that some people will order steak. So you've got your crispy wings, your super crispy wings. People know what they like, and they order it to that specificity, not just hot, medium, mild, but the crispiness level. In terms of the tricked out wings, the way I kind of view the tricked out wings is, listen, are they good? It's like Hawaiian pizza to me, and this is controversial, I guess, but, I would never order Hawaiian pizza, but on occasion when I have ordered Hawaiian pizza or been forced to order Hawaiian pizza, if the pizza is good and they're doing a good version of Hawaiian pizza, like, it can still be good pizza. To me, it's the same thing with tricked out wings. Like, I would never default to wanting to order these things. There are apple pie wings, there are kung pao wings. That's even less crazy than an apple pie wing. There are peanut butter and jelly wings. I don't really want to order those wings. If a place is known for those wings, listen, I've been doing, food spelunking now for a long time. Like, I will fulfill that obligation. I will try them. They better be good. Like, if you're going to do that kind of stuff, they better be good. With the thing in Buffalo, there's experimentation. There's an argument to be made that there are other places outside of Buffalo that are more crazy with some of their wings, but there are certainly places in Buffalo that do crazy wings. The garlic parm wings, the hot garlic parm wings, I really fell in love with there. And, it's a conventional wing, but then they've got the Parmesan thrown in with crazy amounts of garlic. And wow, there's a place called Weechecks, and it's a Yankees bar in Buffalo. And the guy who, on the menu, they're called Red Sox wings. And I'm like, why the hell are these called Red Sox wings? And they're hot garlic parm wings. And eventually I found out that the guy who invented them, he's from Boston, and he's a Red Sox fan. And he works at the Yankees bar, and he knew that he was onto something really amazing when he made these wings. So he wanted to tweak all the Yankee fans. So he called them Red Sox wings because he knew that they would not be able to help themselves but to order them and to have to grit through their teeth to say, I'll have the Red Sox wings while the Yankee game was on the TV was something that really brought them a lot of joy.
Very good. Hey, a couple of quickies. What's the? It seems obvious to me, but like, what do we drink with wings?
A beer.
Yeah.
I do a whole section in the book talking about the myths about how to quell the spice and the heat, and I reached out to the New Mexico Chili Institute to find out how they would best do a test. And there's a whole part of the book about doing celery as being the thing that helps the most, or the blue cheese dressing, or carrot, or milk, or beer, and threw in tequila there because you might be doing shots or something and doing your wings. It actually turned out that I think that the tequila just makes it worse because it kind of swirls it around everywhere and it doesn't dissolve the capsaicin. But honestly, I'm just going to have a beer probably because drinking milk and having wings is going to make me throw up.
Yeah, I hear you. And do great wings? And you'll see where I'm going with this. But do great wings have to be fried?
There's a part that didn't make it into the book where I interviewed Dale Talday, and I don't know how blue I can get here, but he said
totally.
Basically when I asked him about baked wings, like, ask yourself the question, and then there were a whole bunch of expletives involved. Like, do I think of myself as being a loser? Because if I'm a loser, then I'm going to bake my wings. If my friends come over and they say, hey, what are we having? The game is on. And you say to them, oh, great. Hey, guys, I'm so glad you're here. I made some baked wings. They're going to say, dude, you're a loser. I don't want to have your baked wings. I'm leaving. I'm going to the bar, and I'm going to get some real wings.
Okay.
So, that's kind of like how I really, look at it. There are recipes that are out there, people talking about using baking soda and, airing them in their fridge overnight and drying them out and making them more crispy and doing the double fry. And listen, I did all of this recipe testing, and none of those wings in my book were as good as a fried wing. And that's that.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with your authority on this, and nobody's going to argue that the deep fried version of things is generally going to be better than the alternatively baked version.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is, as a guy that wrote a cookbook where in 100 recipes I did not deep fry one ingredient, and I don't own a deep fryer.
Yeah.
I'm just saying to you that I can create great wings on a grill or in a super hot oven. I'm not telling you that they're going to be superior to the fried product. I'm just saying that you can get around. Listen,
there are recipes in the cookbook for baked wings because I felt like I should go down this road, and I think they are good baked wings. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I would prefer to have a fried wing.
Look,
but you do bring up a really good point here when you talk about the grilling, because this is another thing that they do in Buffalo. They will fry their wings, and then they will also grill them afterwards, which is not something that I feel like you see a lot outside of Buffalo. And there's a place called Elmo's that actually does a triple dip and triple and fried grill technique where they fry, dip, fry, grill, and dip in between that, and then grill again. So you get these different coatings of sauce on, and it really, actually, it's funny because you never think of chicken wings this way, but it's almost French in technique if you think about it, right? I mean, when you do a roast or when you're cooking your duck or your chicken, and you're going to sear the cut on the stove, and then you'll bake it, you'll roast it in the oven. I mean, that's kind of what's happening here, where you do the saute, you do the fry, and then you do the grill. You get two different cooking techniques. It's almost French. So I kind of think that's funny. Nobody in Buffalo really, when I mentioned this, they're like, oh yeah, sure, it's French.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't saying it's French, but I think it's interesting that they have that kind of nuance in the texture and the cooking technique to get this different result.
3 more quick ones on buffalo. Number one is, do you make wings like at home?
I do, and I also do have a fryer.
I want to make it easy for people to have like buffalo chicken wings. What would they do?
I mean, listen, you don't have to have a fryer. If you're not going to have a fryer, you just need to have a good kitchen thermometer, and you need to be able to maintain the temperature. It's just harder to maintain the temperature with having to deal with the thermometer and monitoring it, moving it up and down in terms of the heat levels. But you want to have your oil. Peanut oil is what I would use. Vegetable oil at 375.
Right.
Make sure it's at that temperature before you drop the wings in.
Okay.
And then make sure they're really dry. Drop them.
Right.
Fry them for 16 minutes. Take them out. Toss them in some paper towel maybe if you want to dry off some of that excess, or just let it sit above the fryer, and then toss them in your butter and hot sauce mixture.
I just want to make sure, by the way, that I haven't misled people for the last 10 years. It's all about Frank's for me.
Oh, totally.
Okay. So that's for everybody who is paying attention here. What Arthur is telling you is that you're going to fry the wings. Now, you don't have a deep fryer at home, either do I. That doesn't matter because you have a big old pot or a Dutch oven, and you load it up with peanut oil, and you get the temperature like super high, and you drop in wings, which, by the way, you've dried with a paper towel because that does make a difference. And then 15 minutes later, when you pull them out, you actually bathe them, if you will, or shake them around with the sauce, and the sauce is a combination. I'm going to say, Arthur, you can help me with this on the proportion. It's basically half butter, half Frank's hot sauce, available at Costco.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the pre-made sauces. I do believe in just getting your Frank's hot sauce and mixing it with butter yourself.
Yep. Why not? There's no other way.
It really depends in terms of the ratio, like how much you want your sauce to be hot, and that's where the heat levels come from. So you like it half. I wouldn't argue with you. I like it a little hot too. But there's I think it's 1-to-3 ratio is what the original ratio was.
Meaning, okay, so let me just make it easy for people because buffalo chicken wings are brilliant, right? So you get some chicken wings, right? You dry the hell out of them, and you're going to drop them into some very hot peanut oil for 15 minutes. When they're done, you take them out, you dry them again, paper towels, just to absorb some of the excess fat. And then you're going to put them in essentially what is a vat, if you will, of sauce that you've made with a combination of butter and Frank's hot sauce. And when you say proportion, I'm going to say what, like 3 parts Frank's to 1 part butter?
So it's 1/2 cup of Frank's to 1/3 cup of butter is the actual official recipe.
Great.
But you're not going to go to hell in a hot sauce basket if you go half and half.
If you deviate. Right, okay. But that's how you make them. And what I love about that is that you're talking about 1, 2, that's 4 ingredients. I mean, it's like, this is like, I tell people all the time, because, and I wrote a book about it. Like, if I see more than like 6 or 7 ingredients, my eyes just begin to shut. So the beauty of buffalo chicken wings, which are just one of the great kind of like easy, yummy foods of the world. You're talking about 4 ingredients, chicken wings, which are inexpensive, a whole bunch of oil, peanut oil being a good one, but I mean, I suppose you could use some other neutral oil, like a grapeseed or a canola, whatever. And they get fried up a bunch of times, and then you've basically taken, butter and Frank's hot sauce, and you bathe it in that, and people are happy.
100%. I mean, you can nerd out over this, and people in Buffalo do. There are places that don't toss their wings; they paint the sauce on the wings.
Nice.
Which sounds crazy. And when I asked the owner of the restaurant, doesn't that take more time? He said that's what we like people to think. They've like timed it out, the amount of time that they say that they use to paint the.
I might have lost you. Let's see. I think I might have lost Arthur, but I know that I have the rest of you here. Let's just see if we can get Arthur back on the line here. Arthur, can you hear me or no? All right, let's try. Let's get Arthur back on. Here we go. We're talking about buffalo chicken wings with Arthur, and if we can get him back on the line, we're going to find out right now. Always have a technical thing. We're going to ask him about two things that are buffalo related. One of them is beef on weck, and the other is, pizza. Let's see if we can get Arthur back on the line here. Bear with me, peoples. Bear with me. I am sorry about that. Well, there's Arthur here. Let's see if this works. Let's try this. Hey, are you there?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if I can get you back on. Don't move, because we're on the air, still live. But I'm going to try to see if I can put you on, back on speaker here. Okay, hang on. Don't move, because I was telling people that I want to ask you two questions. One of which is going to be about beef on weck.
Yeah.
And the other is going to be about pizza. We have to segue into pizza. So hang with me until we get reconnected here. But even if not, I can, let's see if this works. I always have some, it's kind of almost a hallmark of the show in some ways. Don't move. I'm going to kill this Skype right here. Yeah, it's always a technical thing. Let me try one more time here, Arthur. But even if not, I'll put you on the speaker and we'll get it that way. What is the story with beef on weck? What is that all about?
So beef on weck is a very thinly sliced top round that's roasted that is served on a kummelweck roll, which is basically a Kaiser roll that is heavily salted and dotted with caraway seeds on top. And then you have a liberal application of horseradish. And it's just this super juicy, just bone brothy, thinly sliced beef that it's one of the most underrated sandwiches, I think, in New York.
Let's do that again, because when you actually caught my attention with the idea that it's an underrated sandwich. Beef on weck, you're saying it's kind of like it's a roast beef on like a soft. Well, give it to me again, because it's too good. It's too exciting.
So the kummelweck roll is like a Kaiser roll. It's a very soft, when in New York City we have like our bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches on a Kaiser roll. But like imagine the best Kaiser roll you ever had.
Right.
And it's got like a very heavily salted top with like pretzel salt almost and caraway seeds. So you have this seasoning and this pungent like spice, and inside it you have this very thinly sliced, tender, juicy top round that is dipped in an au jus. It's not a French dip sandwich. That's not the same thing. And then it's also topped with horseradish, and it's just one of the most underrated sandwiches in New York. And part of the reason why is because it has a hard time moving beyond the confines of Buffalo, because there's not a demand for it outside of the city. And it's like when we're talking about bagels and eating it the right way, you're going to go to places in New York that serve beef on weck or encounter it outside of Buffalo, and it's not going to be the same thing because the bread's not going to be as good. And the bread can't be as good because it can't travel. And the bread can't travel because you can't put the salt and the caraway seeds on the bread and then ship it, because the salt wicks out all the moisture from the roll and makes it stale. So, and then, the best places in Buffalo also have a carving station in the middle of the room. And unless you have a demand for this sandwich, then you can't have a carving station. So it's kind of like a chicken egg scenario. Like, you can only have the carving station if you're going to have enough people ordering the sandwich, and you're going to only have the bread if you can make the bread on premises. So you're never going to get it unless you're in Buffalo.
Well, finally, that takes us to the subject of pizza. And in the short time that we have remaining, because they've extended our time, normally I would be signing out by now, but they've extended us because we started a little bit late. Let's just do a quick pizza thing. And I'm saying this because you and I live in New York, but...
Pizza capital of the world.
The pizza capital of the world, thank you. But you're excited about the style of pizza in Buffalo. What's that all about?
Listen, I didn't think I was going to like it. I have friends that since I've come back and I talk about it, they're like, Arthur, I know you're like, you know, you went there, you wrote the book and whatever, but you don't really like it, do you? I like it. I mean, I really, really like it. I would say, you know, people talk about it, they compare it to the Sicilian pie. It's not a Sicilian pie. I'd say that Buffalo-style pizza is typically cup and char pepperoni, where you get that curl of the pepperoni that's become very well known now, but it hadn't been, and it was something that was always in Buffalo. And you get a slim, sometimes like non-existent crust. Here, let me put it this way. I'd say it's a Detroit amount of cheese, a Motor City trim, a main undercarriage, if you think of like Portland's Macucci's, where you've got this puffy Sicilian, and a New York City sole. And you've got toppings that go out over the edge of the crust. So like the pepperoni could even be on the crust. The cheese is out over the crust. It starts to melt on the pan where it's been cooking and get all crusty and black. So it's like that Detroit effect. And it has no structural integrity whatsoever. The sauce is extra sweet. Everything's out of proportion, but somehow it all comes together as like the sloppiest, sexiest slice of pizza that you could possibly think of. And I'll put it to you this way. In New York City, and I wrote this piece and I got some flack for it, but I stand by it. If you go down to Prince Street Pizza, you will see people on a line down the block to get that copious pepperoni and all the crazy cheese and the sauce, and it's coming over the edge, and it doesn't stay on the pizza, it goes on the plate, and it's the most Instagram slice of pizza in New York City. I would say that that's the closest you can get to Buffalo-style pizza in New York City. People don't know that they are Instagramming Buffalo-style pizza, basically.
Arthur, let me ask you a question, because you mentioned the sweetness of the sauce. I noticed that you went to my hometown pizza place at some point. The House of Danny there in Kew Gardens, Queens. But and that's notorious for the sweet sauce. But I didn't get that you loved it so much. What was that all? What happened over there?
Yeah, I think maybe they were having a bad day. The guy was a little rude behind the counter, and that could be part of the experience. But the older guy who was actually making the pies, looked at me and gave me a look of I was right. He even reprimanded the guy who was being rude. But more to the point, the pizza itself, when I got it, it wasn't great. I don't know. It was a little messy, and I like a sloppy slice, but there was no structural integrity. The sauce was too sweet. Listen, I would go back and give it another try because it's a well-known, well-loved place. I didn't have a good time.
I got a little lucky, Arthur, because I grew up within walking distance of that particular pizza place, still in business 61 years later. And now, and I know that I mentioned this, and our connection here is not as good and we're running out, but I know that I mentioned this. Mr. Pete Wells, arguably the most influential food writer in America, writing restaurant reviews for the New York Times, came out yesterday with his 10 favorite, 10 great dishes of 2018. There are two that I want to mention. One is that he also liked, about a month after I wrote a review of the restaurant in the Daily Meal, he liked the arista di cinghiale, the roasted wild boar, over at Ristoro di Cinghiale over on East 27th Street, a month behind me, just as an FYI. And he also put down as one of his top 10 dishes of the year, and this is like my goddamn good fortune. He put down the pepperoni square at Mama's 2, which is very hot right now.
Yeah.
And I know that because it's my neighbor. That's my, like, I went from being House of Danny when I was a kid, and now I live around the corner from Mama's 2.
Well, so what do you think about Mama's 2?
Well, here's the thing. I have a little bit of a bias, and I'll tell you why. I was there when it first opened, before anybody even knew that it existed, because my wife and I go out on like a Saturday night date. Across the street, there's a jazz club called Smoke, and after being in Smoke, where there is a 2-drink minimum, we come out of there, 10:30 at night. We're peckish, and I see this light across the street.
Beckoning to you, a beacon.
Oh my God! It's like it's going, Rob, come on in here. And all of a sudden, I see it's Mama's 2, and I know that there's a Mama's around the corner too. So this is an extension. Mama's around the corner was never, let's put it this way. I was in the hood for a dozen years. I never ordered from there. It was not the best in the neighborhood, but I tasted this stuff, and I was like, oh, this is good. We got a place in the neighborhood. The problem is that it got so hot, so quick, to the point where yesterday, the most influential restaurant critic in America in the New York Times reports it as one of his top 10 dishes of the year, the pepperoni square. It's a hassle. I can't call them up now and order in. You got to do it online. I order online like a week, like within the week. And I asked for a half of arugula pizza. They send me a half pepperoni and half arugula. I get half pepperoni, and the other half doesn't have the arugula. It's basil. They've become kind of too hot, too soon, too arrogant, too difficult. But I'll tell you this. If I'm in the hood and I want a good slice, I'll tell you something, man. It's pizza at the end of the day kind of is about the bread. And the dough on that thing is outstanding.
So, see, I would argue that it's also Buffalo-esque.
Yes, and tell me why.
If you look at that slice, you've got the classic copious amounts of pepperoni, that like cup and char.
Right.
You've got a huge, more cheese than you probably should have.
Yep.
More sauce than you probably should have. It's out of ratio. It's not in proportion. And the ingredients go out over the crust. It's thicker. Most of the time, they don't have structural integrity. They're all the hallmarks of Buffalo-style pizza. I think it's a good slice. I like the guy. I'm really glad that he's gotten the attention that he has. I think that the slices are a little too burnt for my taste. They're just a little. I'm not saying for my taste. I think they're a little over. That's his style. That's what he likes to do. If you talk to Al Santillo from Santillo's out in New Jersey, he makes the argument that there's like, hey, you gotta have the burn because it got these chocolate notes, these bitter chocolate notes in the burn. And I'm like, okay. But it's burnt. Like, it's a little bit burnt. But, more power to him. I think that it's a good slice. It has the potential for greatness. I'm glad that he's getting the attention. Just so you know, I don't know that this is 100% going to happen, but he told me when I was up there last that the original Mama's, he has plans next year to turn it into a pizza beer hall. So you may have a changeover in that old school place. If you want to have that slice before it changes over, if you haven't ordered it like you said you hadn't because it didn't look good or hadn't been good, now might be the time to try it because it might not be there.
By the way, if they do the changeover, you can find me there. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Arthur Bovino for an hour of outstanding deliciousness. Arthur, tell people where they can find the Buffalo Book.
You can find it on Amazon or hopefully your local Barnes & Noble.
Well, there you go. At least Amazon. That's the easy way. Thank you for doing this with me. I will appreciate it. And there you go. Arthur Bovino, ladies and gentlemen. Buffalo Everything, the Pizza Cowboy. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Rob. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you. Well, coming to the close here, my friends. I sorry about the but it's as advertised. We do have the technical difficulty. Arthur's book, Buffalo Everything, available on Amazon, and also another great Christmas idea, Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. You can find that on your Amazon as well. a great holiday gift. 100 recipes using basically 6 ingredients or less for the most part, with my user-friendly formula to get the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort. And I have chicken thighs in there, by the way, like my 2-ingredient chicken thigh recipe you can find in there. And so if you happen to be, by the way, in the New York area, as I mentioned before, get in touch with me, shortorderdad@gmail.com, and I'll tell you how to register for the class I'm giving on January 23rd here on the Upper West Side. We can cook together. I think there's 2 or 3 spots left. As always, my friends, a pleasure to be with you. Glad that we could get together tonight and talk about deliciousness. And remind you as I do that life is short. Never wait on meals. See you next time.